All right, I've got the signal that the webinar is now broadcasting to all attendees. So hopefully the signal is coming in loud and clear. My name is Greg Chambers with US Farm Data with the latest entry in our series on lead generation and other tools besides the lists that we know and love so dearly, the US Farm Data list. This goes beyond, and what we're going to talk today about is Google AdWords. I still call it Google AdWords, but it's Google Ads. Old habits are hard to break. Some housekeeping items, the webinar chat is open and Nui is monitoring that. So if you have any questions, you can stick them in there. And there's also a Q&A section that I usually check as we're moving along. But today what we're going to we'll give you some quick little peeks into campaigns, how to connect the dots for customers. We'll talk to give you some broad things. But as I went through what this was really about, there are really three big ideas, and there's 10-ish things that you can do right now. So I ended up calling them tricks. And then this morning I had that big moment of self-doubt where I thought, should I be referring to them as tricks? But they're little tricks that we use to get more out of the AdWords tool, out of search, so this would be SEM. You see it abbreviated SEM all the time, search engine marketing. But we'll roll through those. I will try to keep you here for less than a half hour, and then we will wrap it up. So if you have any questions or comments, actually, if you have any questions that you are hoping to get some insight into, feel free to throw them into the chat before we begin, because then I'll make sure that I will try to address it as we go along. And if I don't know the answer to it, then I will find the answer, because I will use Google search and I will find the answer. Let's start with the in-news note. First of all, I'm supposed to tell you this. As Google partners, we are obliged, I'm sure there's somewhere in the small print, that we now need to call it Google Ads. It's just one giant product. It's no longer just AdWords. Why they do this, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of things that are happening with Google. I got an announcement this morning that showed a whole bunch of new products that are on the way. Google Home, they're coming for us. And the most interesting part about that, when it comes to Google AdWords, is so many of these things are voice driven, right? So they are voice activated, and we're going to start playing with search. So our tech team was actually demonstrating it on US Farm Data on actually not the Google tool, it was on the Alexa tool. But it was pretty fascinating to see how you could navigate our database just by talking to it. And it worked, and it worked pretty well for the first time out. So Google AdWords is now Google Ads. You will hear me refer to it as Google AdWords again, because it's just hard for me to break this habit. But what we're going to do, I'm going to give you the three main ideas I'm going to talk about today. Is they get grouped into, one will be planning, and so I have some planning tricks. I have tracking. We'll talk about, so it's one thing to plan the campaign, but then how can you track how it's actually doing? I will do some tracking tricks that we use. And then the driver of this whole piece, right, the old words in AdWords, is keywords and key phrases, and how to put some of the tricks that we use to get those going. And then I will give you a landing page trick to wrap everything up. And along the way, I'll even try to give you some examples that make sense, or that help with to aid in understanding. So let's first talk about planning tricks. The first one is the way that these tools work. All of them is they have gotten more and more complex. No matter what they do to the interface, they are not easy to just pick up and start using. And like I was listening to these two guys talk about analytics, and one guy was really big on, we see the analytic future where, we're data driven, where everybody is much more data driven. And the other guy was like, yeah, I don't know. The biggest problem with analytics is you need to it's a tool that needs to be applied afterwards. And that's really what the first thing we do when we do planning. So when we enter campaigns, we start with what it is that we're trying to accomplish in the future. And that sounds basic, because it is, right? You need to start with where it is that you want to go, and then work backwards to today. So when we're doing that, Usually the first questions, if you've never done these campaigns before, is how much is this going to cost and how long is it going to take? And I'll give you at the end some quick trips on that. But the answers to those questions are really tied into how it is that we're going to define success in the future. Is it going to be number of new customers? Is that come through this channel? Is it going to be not only number of new customers, but the type of sale that they have a higher average sale or lower average sale than we're used to? What is the cost per acquisition that we're hoping for? What is the cost per lead, right? Leads come before acquisition. What about if we're just collecting something like emails? So what is it we're trying to do? And then let's work backwards to how the campaign looks and what we're going to be able to do from it today. But as far as the questions to how much and how long, how much are you going to spend and how long is it going to take? Here's the quick cheats on that. If somebody walked in today with a perfectly qualified lead that you were able to go close, and they asked for a finder's fee, that is an indicator of how much you are willing to pay. And so for some companies, they say, oh, somebody they walked in and gave everything to us, we'd pay 50% of the average ticket that we'd give them for commission, because literally you have to do nothing else on there. That gives you an indicator of how much you're willing to pay for an acquisition, that cost per acquisition number. And then as far as how long that it takes to achieve this result, that question, how long from the start to finish on your average sales cycle? Thinking about taking somebody from either that they've never heard of you before all the way to that they're an active, happy customer, or somebody who has heard of you, but then when they enter into the sales cycle, how long does that take? That is a good indicator of how long the first testing period will be. So if we did work with the client, and he told me from the very beginning, he's like, Greg, these things, like my business, it takes 1.5 to 3 years to complete a project. So the sales cycle, when I told him, I was like, it's going to be 1.5 of, running results and trying to figure this out. And then it'll be the next 1.5 before you really can plan on closing. And then how much his average sale in this case was $150,000. How much was he willing to pay? Well, he was willing to pay 20%. They're very generous on that. So I was like, and you can look at spending somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to make the whole thing work. Are those numbers hard and fast? No, but they're just an indicator, right? They're a way to help us make decisions and plan on things along the way. They help with whoever it is that's designing your ad program too, by the way, because they kind of give an indication of how hard it's going to be to make it before we get to see any results. On a super long sales cycle where your average ticket is super high, your sales process is pretty complicated, probably too complicated to be caught inside of a search and a visit to a website and then a close. So with that in mind, right, we need to be realistic as to what we can actually accomplish with a tool like Adwords. So the first trick is this. It is starting with the future. So before we do any work inside of the tool, what is it that we really want to accomplish? How's it going to be there? The second planning trick we have is making sure that campaigns are structured correctly. So when we structure campaigns, AdWords account, which should be ad account. I need to go in and change that. Sorry, Nui. Your ad account is the account, right, that you're spending money in. But campaigns, each campaign is a step towards a goal. Each campaign is made up of ad groups. Each ad group is made up of keywords, ad text, landing pages. The challenge happens when campaigns overlap. It isn't really when ad groups or keywords overlap, because you may use the exact same keywords in various ad groups and campaigns depending on what you're aiming for. And as we get further into keywords, I'll give you some hints as to how we break our ad campaigns apart in a perfect world. But here's an example. So this is actually from a customer, and running in this is a huge AdWords. It's a huge AdWords project, but as he's targeting these particular words, these are actual searches on the left that people are searching for. So you see like the Hyster forklift radiator and how it was matched, phrase match, exact match, broad match, whether it was added or so excluded would be negative keywords, but added means that the computer added them for you. But The challenge was it's under campaigns. So if we know that campaigns are made up of ad groups, we have some of those exact same keywords that are showing up. Forklift radiators are showing up in multiple campaigns. And the issue there is that the spend, Google doesn't know exactly where to spend the money. And then when we try to learn lessons, if you turn one down or turn one off and it pops up somewhere else that you don't expect it, it changes the results there too. The idea, so when I approached this guy, I was like, oh, well, why are we duplicating keywords across the different campaigns? And he's like, oh, it's because I want my ad to show up more than once. Unfortunately, Google doesn't let you do that. So you can't just own all of the real estate around there without maybe being really good at like a product ad and a text ad they'll let show at the same time. But it's, you know, you need to have search engine optimization and show up organically in order to make that things happen. So one of the tricks that we look for is make sure that your campaign is designed correctly from the get-go. And that really gets me into the third piece, which is finish the campaign. If the first part is start with the end in mind, then the other thing I would say before you jump into the tool, finish it on paper. And so if this is the way that a campaign flows, right? You number one is you buy an ad, and then the ad shows up on the keywords that you want. And then you collect the information from the customer all the way through to, this is how many clicks I got, this is how much that costs, this is how many conversions I got, and this is the cost per conversion, says Google. And I took this right from Google. This is me working backwards along those same lines. And this is actually for a product that our own product, the US Farm Data product. We have a new research tool that we're playing with. And so to drive some new traffic into that, we start with the very bottom, right? Which is the, if I've got traffic to that new marketing tool page, or emails that I collect from that marketing tool page, or CRM, that they get entered into our CRM tool, but it was because they came from the marketing page, the keywords that the reps are putting in there, and what each of those are the conversion rate on those. And so right now I'm just guessing, right? And so I say, I'm hoping that I can get traffic there for at least, you know, $2, that I can collect emails for $10 each, and then I could get people to put things in our CRM where they're talking about this tool at $20. And then this is what I estimate that's conversion rates, because that would be nice to have a cost per acquisition of $100. I don't know that that's actually going to happen, but that's where I start, because then I can work my way down into, if you look the arrow down, my new market research tool page, I can now look at, this is the page that's supposed to be able to do one of those three things. The count page is where they get introduced to this page. So they're coming off of, if you've done a count on US Farm Data, you will eventually see a new tool show up at the bottom, and that will direct you over to this page. Then, okay, so now I need a landing page to get you into the count, and then I need to figure out what I'm searching for. And in this case, this market research tool is really driven by people who are looking for to do more market research than they are looking for the data. And so how many crops, how many farmers those are some of the estimates of the terms that we're going to be putting in. How do we put those into ad groups and campaigns? So if my goal at the front end is, you know, I need exposure to this tool, we need to generate some interest and ideally some clients to help pay for this thing that we built for somebody else that we're going to roll out for everybody. That is finishing it on paper. It looks a lot like this before it ever gets into the point where the AdWords people are programming it into the AdWords tool. So those are the three tricks. And those are tricks around planning, right? So start with the end in mind, begin with the end in mind, as a Cubby, to borrow from Cubby. On that, work the requirements backwards, which we just did. And then make sure your campaign is structured correctly. When we put the whole thing together, understand how that whole thing works. And that's the way that page works. Okay, so let's get into some tracking stuff. Now that we've got our campaign outline in place, what are some tricks that we can use in there? The question is the same question that Whitney was asking a long time ago. How will we know whether or not these campaigns are working? And the way that we have divided pieces internally, these are terms that you're probably familiar with too, but I will throw them up anyways, just to make sure we're on the same page. We're looking for leading leading indicators. The lagging indicators are really easy to find, right? That's usually sales, that's increased sales, increased customers. Those are the things that have happened, but it only directs us to the past. Leading, we're looking for what are those things that we can measure right now to let us know that we're at least on the right track, right? If it's going to take us X amount of time to learn how to do this campaign, how is it that we can get there? So clicks, calls would be an example of leading indicators. I understand sales qualified leads and sales are eventually what we're after, but unfortunately, that's not the right place for us to start to make sure we're on track. Because by the time we get to those, we've maybe spent too much money along the way. And that's really our trick, is matching up the terms that people are actually searching for with clicks and with calls, even though we know that they're just entering into the sales cycle. Trying to identify those places where they'll show up, right? Can they click off the ad? Is your product or service the kind of thing where people can see the ad and click off their mobile phone? Or is it the kind of thing where they can download a paper? Or is it the kind of thing where you can just see if anybody was searching for this particular term and ended up on this page, then they've at least got a branding impression, and we're working on that. So that's our trick, is really on that left-hand side, making sure that we're targeting leading indicators as we're learning from these campaigns. And the way we get all of this stuff is inside of Google Tag Manager. So if you haven't installed this tool, please do. And if you need any help with that, let us know, because our team can do it for you. The great thing about Google Tag Manager is when you put this code in, you put it in once and it goes all over your website. And then you can go in and you can make changes inside of Tag Manager, and you no longer have to you no longer have to go into the website to make these changes. So I hate to say that it eliminates the IT department, but for a lot of us, that's what it does. Because if it's tracking every single page, we can create what we want the trigger and what we want the goals to be that we're tracking, including clicks on phone numbers if you do mobile stuff, or downloads, clicks to download papers, even clicks to get off your website. We can track those things. You can build them quickly. The point of having this on here, and the reason why it's so important to us, is because as marketers, right, we're always doing testing. And as the nature of tests would suggest that most of them are not permanent. We don't keep them forever. We just need to do it long enough in order to learn, and then we're going to change it again. It's that kind of stuff that drives IT departments crazy with all the changes that are coming. So this tool allows you to go in and through a really simple interface, I should have pulled it up, through a simple interface, we can design our own campaigns on paper and then figure out what it is that we want to track, and then come in here and see if there's any way to make it fire, right? Because even all the way down to that user engagement, there's a few other triggers that are on there. How far did they scroll down? Did they submit a form? Did they see particular elements that you wanted them to see? These are all things that we can build reports on, and then we can get some. So our leading indicators become a little more valuable to us. We can track some things online, or a few more things online that we used to have to rely on offline for. So tracking tricks, that's one of the big tracking tricks. The last one being try to come up with a lot more than just dollars in the bank on how it is that you're going to get paid, and start thinking in those terms. The example that we used for this new tool that we're going to be selling through the US Farm Data, this market research tool, email addresses are a form of currency for us because we can keep in touch, right? We keep like we keep in touch with you. So in order to do that, we need to be adding value as we keep in touch. But that your name suddenly becomes very valuable, right? So if you're like me, you've got your cheap email address, which is my home address, but then I also have my expensive one, which is my business address. And I really don't want things cluttering up my business account. So one of our indicators inside is how many AOL accounts do we have versus how many company accounts do we have, and what type of information seems to generate each one of those pieces of currency. Or maybe inside of there is, instead of just an email address, I want to get expanded contact information, survey responses, or is it as simple as a click or impression? But putting dollar amounts on each one of those helps us manage budget inside of AdWords, and it helps us rethink the whole big program. So as we're trying to put dollars on all of it, in the end, right, the CFO, the CEO, they want to have this some form of measurement going on. These are great indicators. They're not necessarily things that you totally build your business on, but they're initial indicators, and it goes more than just, oh, we spent $5,000 on that and we didn't get anything out of it. Well, it should be, we spent $5,000 and we were hoping to get $10 for an email address. The actual result ended up being 20, because then we can make new decisions based on that. So when it comes to tracking those lagging indicators, let's make them a little deeper and have a few more things that we keep track of. Because this is ultimately what we're trying to answer this question, right? Is if we go back to our opening statement, which is begin with the end in mind, what does success look like if you tripped on it? It's a great question. I wish I remember the guy who was the one that gave that to me. But if success in the best case and a worst case, right? This is best case. This is what we hope for. This is actually the trend of what's happening. And then this is how we would know that we need to shut this thing down. Knowing all that before you ever get started on AdWords campaigns. So there you go. That's a big tracking and planning tricks that will help you get more out of these campaigns. Some of the fun ones, though, let's get into these keyword tricks, because we have 3 of these too. Google Ads has a wonderful little keywords planning tool. So the skeptic in me says anything that Google tries to help that says this is going to be good for you to use, I always think, well, yeah, and it's also going to be really good for you. And when you do that, they give you these search volumes and forecasts, and you can pick your different terms. We approach it a slightly different way, in that we like to use you. So as the content, right, we're a process. We focus on process. You guys are content experts, our clients are. And so we ask them, like, what are common questions that you get? And what are, some of the things that you think that people would search for? And in general, those tend to be like very jargony, very, you know too much, like I know too much. It's hard for me to talk about AdWords sometimes because I just know too much about it. So the more we get into the search, at the very bottom of the search page is those searches related to whatever it was that we were searching for. So if you had outsourced B2B lead generation, and I'm like, oh, that's a normal person would search for that. Well, it turns out that they really don't, right? Call box leads. Some of the suggestions, you can tell if they're too far off of what you're looking for, you're not going down the right way. But if there's a few of these that look good, you should know, or at least we should guess, that due to the law of big numbers, Google is giving you what most people are searching for. So you can start to click on those and get your own phrases, like cold calling lead generation services. We don't do that. So B2B sales outsourcing companies, we don't actually outsource sales, right? You can start to ask questions of each of those responses. Is that going to fit? Is that what we do? I don't want those. And then when you find the results, the first thing I look at is, are there ads? So ads, obviously, it's heavy competition. All that means to me is when I see 4 ads on a search term, it just tells me it's going to be expensive. So if I'm trying to learn how to maximize my budget off that, I'm probably not going to bid on that particular term unless I can also add something in, like only if somebody is searching for that in my zip code, for instance. That would knock it down. If I have to compete against all these companies worldwide, that's a challenge. But if I can just compete with them when it's somebody who's in my backyard who maybe is getting exposed to my other advertising, that's way better. And then everything below the ads, that's where I'm looking for I put my competitors as a question mark, because I'm really wondering, like, are those my competitors? Because if they're not the same people that are doing what I'm doing, then the term is probably not correct. The reason I say that is because Google is always going to be pushing up the most relevant results, right? That's, they say that, I think they said 15 to 20% of searches click on the ads. So in this case, out of 100 people, there's only 20 people at the most that are clicking on those top 4 ads. They're scrolling down into the organic results where 80% of the clicks are. And I think most of the clicks end up going on the first 2 or 3. And so do those 2 or 3, can you throw a blanket on them? Do they all fit the exact same solution? In this case, They do. So that would be like, that tells me, well, if my competitors are there, then that is a good a search term and solution. As you get into terms that don't have any ads, those are interesting to me because obviously they're a little cheaper. If there's no ads and the top 3 results are all over the board, like Wikipedia and some random results, and I don't see any companies that are in there at all, then I'm probably not as excited because it's not going to help me going forward. And that's because this is the way that we view the world, right? Is as people are thinking about keywords, they're using Google to help define a problem. Then they're working through how people solve those problems. Then they're settling on the options that work best for them. And then at the very end, they're probably searching for what it is I have to give them. So if the outsourced B2B lead generation is probably more of this is the option that I've settled on. We're not going to do B2B lead generation internally. We're going to outsource it. And right, that's why there's so much competition there. To use the old book, Blue Ocean Strategy, right? That's the red ocean. There's a lot of carnage going on right at the end there, and that's why it's expensive. So you'd better have a finely tuned conversion program, or you're going to spend a lot of money and lose out. Or you could swim to the blue ocean, which is what we try to do, which is up here. Can we pick up people based on their early research? They're not ready to buy, but can we get in front of them? Can we help them with alternatives? Can we help them with how to best sort through the options, right? What if we solve the problem every day and they solve the problem sometimes, then what is it that we can give them there before we get into this, you've made your decision now, consider us in there too, because we may have the best opportunity for you. Clicks get more expensive as you move them down. And one of the cheats in here is we know that if we can get in those first 2 buckets of enlighten me and what are their alternatives, we can use retargeting, which is part of Google Ads, which is they come to the website, they pick up a pixel because they're learning. And then when they finally get around to the best deal, then that's when you can show them an ad again. And guess what? It's cheaper. So we no longer have to spend $50 a click for some of these keywords at the very bottom, because what we're doing is we're getting a retargeting ad to the person searching for that. And, let's say the click is a tenth of that. And what I'm referring to here, sorry to do this, to zip back, but the way the keyword is structured, if you remember this, where I'm talking about the ad campaigns, those campaigns on the top there where I say AdWords account and then ad campaign, a campaign to me is that approach. If I can create 4 different campaigns around a particular issue a particular product that we're trying to solve, it's a lot of work, but at the same time, my cost per acquisition tends to be the very lowest when we take the time to build those things. The challenge is it just requires a little bit of patience, and that's why we're always looking for those leading indicators. Okay, the other trick I try to think of, or that this reminds me of, is the more times you can be exposed to them through their decision process, the more familiar you become and the more they're into you, right? So you've heard me talk about, if you've attended these before, and I saw a few of you are repeat signups, welcome back. The rule of 30, right? Where it takes 9 impressions of an idea before it sticks, and we round that up to 10. And then we say, but only 1 of 3 messages gets through at any particular time. So we need to be in front of them a lot. And one of the secrets of what we do is we help people, because we know that if we're bidding on those specific terms, and if you could just think back to that radiators, right? If somebody is searching for something that specific about those forklift radiators, even if they don't click on the ad, if the ad is well designed to catch an eye and to at least be noticeable, and if I can get your radiator, Greg's Radiator Company, in front of you multiple times as you're searching around what's the best way to get a new radiator, or to fix your radiator, or whether or not your radiator needs to be fixed, any of those questions that you may have around that, the rule of 30 does apply. But the best part is that when you're bidding on clicks, is that you get impressions for free. Now, me saying that this is, I know anecdotally that it works, because you can see the more when people start with us who have never done campaigns before, and nobody's really searching for their company name, and over time their company name searches go up, which is another trick tactic that we use, is bid on your own company name. And the reason you do is because you don't want anybody else to do it. B, it's cheap. Google is kind and doesn't charge you a lot for your names. But C, they try to show your ad to everybody who searches for it. So over time, it's a great indicator of like brand awareness, right? Are we building our brand? Are more people searching for us? I had an old company where it was a total startup, but that was our key indicator from the very beginning. Is we'll know we're doing better when we have people searching for our company name, and over the years you could see that grow, and that was really the value that we were trying to build, right? It helped us justify some of that massive investment that we were putting into this. So far we've talked about planning tricks, right? Begin with the end in mind, and make sure that it's structured correctly and finish it on paper before you actually complete it. We talked about tracking. Now let's talk, and we talked about keywords. And one last shortcut is when you're pushing everybody through the system, they're going to come to your website. We call that a landing page, the page that they land on. And as you design these landing pages, you'll see a lot of information like this, where people say, this is the perfect way to, the perfect landing page. The truth is the perfect landing page, you're going to have to test mightily before you figure out what perfect landing page works for you. And so, but in general, if they follow this is the headline, the hero shot is the product, and then some sort of data collection and a couple calls to action benefits, right? So this is your salesperson. What is the best way for your landing page salesperson to be organized? As you're testing, if you can get actual help from from real visitors, you'll speed up the process of your testing. And the way that I've talked about this before, but that drift bot or some sort of chat bot where it looks automated so that people don't think that it's a real person who's sitting on the other end of the line. People are very comfortable right now with sticking questions into the automated bot. Those questions are the gold that you're after. You're trying to mine those questions to help you with the page, right? So if I get 100 visitors and 7 people check in with the bot and 3 of them ask questions and 2 of those questions are the exact same question, my thought is I can fix my landing page faster because I can get the information that they're looking for quicker. The other place where you get this information is obviously from your salespeople. So I hope you're better at doing that than most of us are. But your salespeople get all the questions. If you could just have them write down all the questions that they're getting, dig through all the emails for the questions if you don't want to use the bot. But there's some way to get, you need your users to tell you, this is, now that I typed in this keyword, which we all agree is great. I've seen this ad, which was pretty good. And then that enticed me to go to this page, and this page matches this ad. It's all great. But now what? Right? You always get, I'm sure you get the same marketing spam that I get. And it's like, oh, 98% of your visitors are leaving. Well, of course they are, because most of the time they're probably not ready to do anything. But when they're leaving, I would love to know, is there any information I can get? If I get information from 2% of my visitors, how can I get information from 3% or 4%? Because that's how we cheat this game, right? That's how we take Google AdWords, and instead of buying every single keyword under the sun and then filtering it down to these are the best ones that work for us, works really great, but it's super expensive. But instead, we take our best shot and work up through the funnel instead of, starting at the top with, we sell widgets, and so we're going to bid on widgets. Let's be a little more creative about that and save some money along the way so that we can generate a positive ROI over time. But we also learn a lot about ourselves and our customers. So that's our summary. So the structure, which is the planning tricks, work backwards, make sure that you're not crisscrossing and creating little Venn diagrams of, yeah, we're advertising to them in this campaign, but we're also doing it in this campaign. Try to keep your campaigns separate, your ad groups separate. It helps with everything. When you're tracking multiple types of tracking indicators, manage them, think in terms of various currencies, not just end of cycles, end of sales cycle stuff. You need to know sooner than that so you can make changes. And then when you're doing keywords, use the search results from Google, use the decision funnel to think about where the campaign, like what you can do inside of which campaign, and think about branding, approaching it from that. This can also help inside of your branding, and then learn more from them by chatting it up. So tools that we're going to give you. Thank you for attending. The Human Beings Guide to Business Growth is my book that is all about how to get your staff more involved in helping you find new leads. The Perfect Growth Formula really helps sales and marketing teams get on the same page and talk about, talk within a framework, and improves communication. And Lead Gen Compass is our new company, which is actually up and running. So it's the service that we've been describing here, right? So Adwords is one of the things that we do, and that's at leadgencompass.com. And you can learn more about that there. You don't need to even talk to anybody anymore. Thank you to the few hundred people that did talk to us to begin with. Any questions? Contact, once again, my name is Greg Chambers. Contact me, Bill Matern, talk to Susan. usfarmdata.com, leadgencompass.com is the company for if you need help with marketing beyond just the database. And that's our email address. I don't see any questions. So thank you for attending. And I ran over. I apologize. 37 minutes, but hopefully it was enjoyable and that you picked up that hint that's going to save your campaign. Thank you.